Welcome. In this session, we're going to be talking about the 4C synergy framework. This is a way of categorizing and understanding synergies that is really helpful for understanding corporate strategy more broadly. One thing that's important to keep in mind when using this framework is that this is a framework that is very focused on the synergy level. So a particular strategic action might not create any synergies. It may create one synergy or it may create multiple synergies. So a complete understanding of how these synergies work and how they might work together is going to be very helpful for evaluating and understanding and making sense of corporate strategies. Within this, not surprisingly, with the 4 C's, there are 4 synergies, each of which starts with a C. There are a couple dimensions that these synergies are categorized based on. The first is resource similarity. A very important thing to remember, again, about this framework is that this resource similarity is talking about the similarity of resources that are being brought together or shared between business units in order to create value. It's not about the overall resource base of 2 companies or 2 business units. So you may have 2 very different businesses that are creating synergies based on overlapping resources within them. So for example, most companies have an HR department, and if 2 companies merge, even if they're in completely different businesses and have completely different customers, they could still combine their HR departments, and that would be an example of a synergy created with a similar resource. The other dimension of this framework is resource modification. So resource modification is essentially thinking about whether or not the resources of a particular business or business unit need to be modified in order to create value when working with the other business or business unit. So again, this is at the synergy level. So it's not thinking about whether or not a company will be changed overall, but whether a particular way of creating value requires resource modification in order to create that value. So when you combine these together, you have the 4C synergies with similar resources and high resource modification. We have consolidation. Shifting to dissimilar resources, we have customization. Going to low resource modification with similar resources, we have combination. And with low resource modification and dissimilar resources, we have connection. And we'll be going through each of these in turn. I also want to note a third dimension that is relevant for these. It's not the basis for the categorization, but some of these synergies tend to be asymmetric, meaning that perhaps one side will be incurring a cost to create the value, and the other side will realize the benefit from that synergy. You could also have symmetric synergies where both sides are getting value out of the cooperation between the businesses or business units. And with some of these synergies, you may have the possibility of either of those taking place. So that will become important as we go forward into future sessions and think about the boundaries of the firm and what types of synergies are best managed within a single organization versus synergies that are best managed between multiple organizations. The first one of these synergies I want to talk about is the consolidation synergy. Again, with consolidation, you have similar resources and high modification. A common example of this is the bringing together of 2 overlapping back office functions of companies. So I gave the example earlier of an HR department. You might have a merger with 2 very different businesses, but they both have an HR department, and you can bring those together and shrink the total number of people necessary to accomplish all the goals for HR. Often this will be with keeping that department from one company or business unit and cutting most of the people from the other business unit, which is why this tends to be asymmetric. So in this case, you have one side incurring the cost for having and managing an HR department, and then the other side is able to realize the benefit of that without incurring the cost of having their own department. This can exist with a lot of different functions within the organization. Again, this is about similar resources and typically modifying those to be smaller. So if you want to use one keyword to remember consolidation synergies, that word is smaller. Another reason that this synergy can be a little confusing is oftentimes in news articles or elsewhere you might read about industry consolidation. In that case, again, it is about the overall size of the industry getting smaller, but there's a lot of things changing with industry consolidation. Some of that might be the creation of consolidation synergies within a new combined firm, but industry consolidation can also create other types of synergies as well. So the next synergy is the combination synergy. This is another example of synergies that might be created when you think about industry consolidation. The combination synergy is taking similar resources and combining them, but with low modification, and the benefits of this tend to be symmetric. So this is an example of a synergy that you might see with industry consolidation, where market power is being increased by the fewer number of firms that remain. The key word for this to remember is power. So for this one, you can imagine a purchasing department or two companies with purchasing departments, and those companies merge and those teams merge. Even if no purchasing managers are laid off, the fact that they're now purchasing for two businesses as part of the same firm, as opposed to negotiating against each other to buy the inputs that the firm needs, means that the firm now has greater market power over suppliers. This power could also happen on the other end. Say you have the only two sellers of some product or service in a market merging into a single firm, and that would increase their market power over their customers since they're no longer competing against each other. So the combination synergy, it's all about market power. This brings us to a little pop quiz. You may not have been expecting to have a little quiz in the middle of this video, but I want to throw out an example and help you make sense of these synergies. So many of you are probably familiar with Walmart. Walmart created Walmart.com, an online retailer, in the year 2000. So for about 20 years now, Walmart has had physical retail stores as well as this online branch selling to customers. Thinking just specifically about the purchasing department, what types of synergy would you expect to be created when you think about the purchasing for Walmart as well as the purchasing for Walmart.com? And I'll give you a second or two to think about which synergy is most likely to be created in that case, or specifically, what synergy do you think Walmart was creating? All right, so the answer for what type of synergy Walmart was creating between these purchasing groups is that they were not creating any synergy for about 20 years. So even though a lot of the same products were purchased by both Walmart and Walmart.com, they had separate teams doing this purchasing. So that meant that there were no consolidation synergies with individual suppliers. They had multiple teams, each negotiating with them for purchasing. They also did not take any advantage of the market power, considering that they were purchasing for both the online and physical retail distribution. And that was one of the reasons that Walmart has actually had a lot of trouble with their online retailing, is that the prices that the physical stores get or pay for their products may be higher or lower than the prices negotiated by Walmart.com. So you might be selling something online that's cheaper than it is in store, or vice versa. That also makes it more difficult to allow customers to buy online and then pick up in store, because if the online price is based on a better discount negotiated by the Walmart.com team with their suppliers, and then the store is expected to fulfill that order out of their own inventory. If they paid a higher price, they might end up losing money on that transaction. So this has created a lot of conflict between those purchasing teams. And just in 2020, Walmart has announced that they're actually going to combine these teams in order to reduce that conflict. So going forward, I would expect there to be both some consolidation synergies, but certainly combination synergies. The article I read about that didn't go into very much detail about what value they were specifically hoping to create. But the lesson that I want you to take away from this example is that even if a synergy seems like it obviously should exist, so Walmart and Walmart.com both selling identical products purchased from the same supplier, they were not creating any synergies with that. They had multiple teams negotiating, and they were not negotiating the same prices or taking advantage of their larger buying power. So that's an example of a synergy that you might naively assume exists, but organizations are very complicated. Lots of potential synergies are not realized. So when you think about organizations, you really need to understand how they're creating value and not just what seems like the obvious way to create value. So the next synergy that I want to talk about is customization synergy. This is with dissimilar resources and high modification. You can think of customization synergy as co-specialization. This co-specialization can take place vertically. So the inputs from one part of the value chain might be better designed or operated to work as outputs. Start that one over. It could be that the outputs of one organization are engineered to work especially well with as inputs for another part of the organization. A common example of that would be in vertical integration, where you might have parts created in one factory and then assembled in another factory right next door. Because those are physically co-located, the shipping costs are much lower when using parts that are created by the other business unit within the firm, as opposed to purchasing from some supplier that may be more distant. So that's co-specialization in the vertical supply chain. You could also have co-specialization between horizontal products offered by the firm. You often see that with software suites, for example. So Microsoft Office or Google's productivity suite or Adobe. All of these companies have suites of software that are designed to work better together. So by using both of those products, you're getting extra value because of that interoperability and co-specialization. So with, again, customization synergies are dissimilar resources with high modification. And when thinking about that, you can really think about co-specialization, which could, again, be vertical or horizontal within the firm. And our final synergy, connection synergy, this is with dissimilar resources and low modification. This is all about pooling outputs in order to lower coordination or search costs. A common example of this is cross-selling. So if you have two sales teams that are both selling different products, if you empower them to also sell the other complementary product, they're able to go to a single customer and offer multiple things to them. So that can lower the cost of selling to your customers. Similarly, if you create a retail store in order to sell your products, by adding additional products to your store, especially if they're designed to be used together or they're commonly used together, that lowers search costs for your customers. So they can come into your store and buy whatever main product it is you're selling, but also other products that they might want to purchase at the same time. And by virtue of having all of those products in the same store, it lowers their effort and makes them more likely to buy multiple products, even if it might be slightly more expensive for those products in the store than they might be elsewhere if purchased separately. So again, this is about pooling outputs in order to lower search costs or coordination costs. And probably the most common example of this, again, is cross-selling. So another pop quiz. We'll throw out an example here of AirPods, the wireless headphones that Apple sells. What types of synergies exist between that and the iPhone? I'll let you, again, think about that for a minute. So would you expect customization synergies between the AirPods and iPhones? Or do you more expect connection synergies, so cross-selling? All right, so this example is the opposite of the Walmart example. So in the Walmart example, it seems like it should have been obvious that both types of synergies could be created. In this case, both types of synergies are being created. So AirPods have been modified to work especially well with Apple's iPhone and other electronic products. In fact, they're only compatible with iPhones and Mac computers and iPads and things like that. So they've been co-specialized and engineered to be complementary. But you also have those connection synergies where customers that are buying an iPhone online might be offered some sort of information about the AirPods in order to encourage customers to buy both of those at the same time. So that would be an example of cross-selling. Similarly, if you go to an Apple store, you'll see displays both for iPhones and for these AirPods, encouraging you to buy both together. So that's an example of connection synergy. So with Apple and AirPods, they're doing a great job of creating both of these synergies. And that's it for the 4C synergy framework. Again, we'll be revisiting these concepts repeatedly throughout the term, so be sure you understand them. And if you don't, feel free to ask questions below or reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer.